Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I gazed out the kitchen window, sipping my morning coffee and watching Lucas toss a football with his sister Megan in our backyard. The Charleston sun cast a warm glow over our suburban neighborhood, and I couldn't help but smile. Life was good. Earth to Jack, Elise's voice cut through my reverie. Did you hear what I said? I turned to face my wife, taking in her polished appearance. Even in casual weekend wear, she looked ready for a magazine cover. Sorry, honey. I was lost in thought. What were you saying? Elise rolled her eyes, but her lips curved into an affectionate smile. I said I have to leave for Miami tomorrow. Last-minute business trip. Miami? That's sudden, I replied, setting down my mug. How long will you be gone? Just a few days. The Henderson account needs some hand-holding, she explained, retrieving her own coffee. You know how it is. I nodded, though something in her tone caught my attention. Everything okay with that client? Oh, you know. Demanding as always, Elise waved off my concern. Nothing I can't handle. The back door swung open, and Lucas and Megan tumbled in, faces flushed from their game. Mom, Dad, who wants to get destroyed in Mario Kart? Lucas challenged, grinning. Megan snorted. As if, I'll wipe the floor with all of you. Language, young lady, I chided, but couldn't help chuckling. And you're both on. Let's see if your old man still has what it takes. As we gathered around the TV, controllers in hand, I caught Elise checking her phone. A small frown creased her brow before she quickly masked it with a smile. Everything all right? I asked quietly. Just work, she assured me. Now, are we gaming or what? The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and good-natured trash talk. As the kids headed upstairs to get ready for dinner, I pulled Elise close. I'll miss you while you're gone, I murmured, kissing her cheek. She leaned into me, but I sensed a tension in her shoulders. It's just a few days, Jack. I'll be back before you know it. The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. I opened it to find Tom, my best friend and lawyer, grinning on the other side. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, stepping inside. Just wanted to drop off those contracts you asked about. Perfect timing, I replied. We're about to have dinner. Want to join us? Tom hesitated, glancing at Elise. I wouldn't want to impose. Nonsense, Elise insisted, though her smile seemed a touch forced. There's plenty to go around. As we settled around the dining table, the conversation flowed easily. Tom regaled us with stories from his latest court case, while the kids peppered him with questions about becoming a lawyer. So, Elise, Tom said during a lull, Jack mentioned you're headed to Miami tomorrow? I noticed a flicker of something. Annoyance? Worry? Cross Elise's face before she nodded. Yes, just a quick business trip. Nothing exciting. I don't know, Tom mused. Miami sounds pretty exciting to me. Beaches, nightlife. Maybe Jack should tag along. Make it a working vacation? Elise laughed, but it sounded forced to my ears. Please, you know Jack. He'd be bored out of his mind sitting through my meetings. She's right, I admitted. I'll leave the client wrangling to the expert. As the evening wound down and Tom prepared to leave, he pulled me aside. Everything okay with you too? He asked quietly, nodding towards Elise. I frowned. Of course. Why do you ask? Tom shrugged. Just checking. Elise seemed a bit off tonight. Probably nothing. His words nagged at me as I bid him good night. I tried to shake off the feeling, reminding myself how lucky I was. A successful business, 2 great kids, and a beautiful, devoted wife. What more could a man want? The next morning, I found myself in the kitchen again, this time watching Elise load her suitcase into her car. Rachel, Elise's colleague and friend, had stopped by to carpool to the airport. You sure you don't want me to drive you? I offered, not for the first time. Elise shook her head, pulling me in for a quick kiss. Don't be silly. Rachel's already here, and you have that big meeting today. Rachel approached, all easy smiles and reassurance. Don't worry, Jack. I'll make sure she behaves herself in Miami. I'd be more worried about you, Elise teased, but there was an undercurrent of something in her voice. As they drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the day ahead. I had a business to run, after all. 3 days into Elise's trip, I found myself buried in paperwork when my phone buzzed. Tom's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, buddy," I answered, grateful for the distraction. "How's Miami treating you?" There was a pause on the other end. When Tom spoke, his voice was tight. "Jack, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." My stomach dropped. "What's going on? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Tom assured me quickly. It's about Elise." I sat up straighter, dread creeping through me. "What about her? Is she hurt?" Another pause. "She's not hurt, Jack, but I saw her on the beach with another man." The world tilted on its axis. "What are you talking about?" "She's there for work." "I know what I saw," Tom said gently. "They were intimate, kissing." "I'm so sorry, Jack." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "There has to be some mistake. Elise wouldn't." "I took pictures," Tom cut in. "I'm sending them to you now. I wish I was wrong, but you need to see this." My phone pinged with an incoming message. With shaking hands, I opened it. The first image hit me like a physical blow. Elise, my Elise, wrapped in the arms of a tall, dark-haired stranger. Their lips were locked in a passionate kiss. "Jack, you still there?" Tom's voice sounded far away. I swiped through the photos, each one driving the knife deeper. Elise laughing, her head thrown back, the man's hand on her thigh. Their fingers intertwined as they walked along the shore. "Who is he?" I managed to croak out. "I don't know," Tom admitted, "but he looks wealthy. Designer clothes, expensive watch. What do you want to do?" What did I want to do? I wanted to wake up from this nightmare. I wanted to rewind time and never see these damning images. I want proof. I heard myself say, my voice cold and unfamiliar. Undeniable evidence. "Jack," Tom said cautiously, "these photos aren't enough." I cut him off. "I need to know everything. Who he is, how long this has been going on. Everything." There was a beat of silence before Tom responded. "Okay, I know someone who can help. A private investigator named Marissa King. She's discreet and thorough." "Book her," I said without hesitation. "Whatever it costs. I want to know exactly what my wife has been up to in Miami." "Are you sure about this?" Tom asked. "Once you go down this road." "I'm sure," I replied, steel in my voice. "No more lies. No more secrets. I deserve the truth." As I ended the call, I stared at the photos again. The woman in them was a stranger, wearing my wife's face. How long had I been living with this imposter? How many other business trips had been covers for her infidelity? Rage bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. But I tamped it down. Now wasn't the time for emotional outbursts. Now was the time for cold, calculated action. Elise thought she could play me for a fool. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of sleepless nights and hidden phone calls. Tom connected me with Marissa King, the private investigator he'd mentioned. Her voice was all business when we spoke. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, "I understand the delicate nature of this situation. Can you tell me what exactly you're looking for?" I paced my home office, phone pressed to my ear. "Everything. Who this man is, how long they've been involved. I need concrete proof of the affair." "Understood," Marissa replied. "I'll need as much information as you can provide about your wife's schedule and whereabouts in Miami." I relayed what little I knew, feeling like a fool with each word. How could I have been so blind? "One more thing," I added. "I want to know who this guy is. Not just his name, but everything about him. His background, his business dealings, all of it." "That level of investigation will incur additional costs," Marissa warned. "Money's not an issue," I said flatly. "Just get me what I need." As I hung up, a text from Elise lit up my screen. "Miss you, honey. Can't wait to be home tomorrow. XO." I stared at the message, while rising in my throat. How many times had she sent me loving texts while in another man's arms? The thought made me want to hurl my phone across the room. Instead, I took a deep breath and typed out a response. "Miss you too. Safe travels." The lies came so easily now. Was this how Elise felt every time she deceived me? Hours ticked by as I waited for news from Marissa. To distract myself, I threw myself into work, reviewing contracts and financial reports until my eyes burned. Anything to keep from imagining Elise with him. Finally, my phone rang. Marissa's number. "What do you have?" I demanded, skipping pleasantries. "Quite a bit, Mr. Reynolds," she replied. "Are you somewhere private? This might be difficult to hear." I closed my office door, bracing myself. "Go ahead." "Your wife's companion is named Victor Blake," Marissa began. "He's a real estate developer, very wealthy and well-connected in Miami. From what I've observed, their relationship appears intimate and established." My free hand clenched into a fist. "How long?" Based on my investigation and some discreet inquiries, I'd estimate at least 6 months, possibly longer. 6 months. Half a year of lies and betrayal. I struggled to keep my voice steady. "And the evidence?" "Extensive," Marissa assured me. "Photos, video footage, hotel records. There's no doubt about the nature of their relationship." I swallowed hard. "Tell me about Blake. What kind of man is he?" Marissa's tone turned grim. "That's where things get interesting, Mr. Reynolds. Victor Blake has a reputation for using his wealth and influence to manipulate people. He's been involved in several questionable business deals, and there are rumors of other affairs. So he's a predator," I spat. "In a sense," Marissa agreed. "He seems to target successful, attractive women in committed relationships. Your wife isn't his first conquest." The word made my skin crawl. "Is there anything else I should know?" "Just one thing," Marissa said. "In my investigation, I uncovered some potentially damaging information about Mr. Blake's business practices. Nothing concrete enough for legal action, but enough to ruin him if it got out," I finished, a plan already forming in my mind. "Exactly," Marissa confirmed. "What would you like me to do with this information, Mr. Reynolds?" I paused, considering my next move carefully. "Hold on to it for now. I may need it later. And Marissa, thank you for your thorough work." As I ended the call, a cold determination settled over me. Elise and Victor thought they were so clever, carrying on their affair right under my nose. They had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow, Elise would return home, probably armed with stories about her business meetings, and maybe even a souvenir for the kids. She'd slip back into our life as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and I was done playing the role of the oblivious husband. It was time to set the stage for my own performance, a show Elise and her lover would never forget. The day Elise was due to return, I gathered Lucas and Megan in the living room. My stomach churned as I prepared to shatter their world. "Dad, what's going on?" Lucas asked, his brow furrowed. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "No, it's not. There's something I need to tell you both about your mother." Megan's eyes widened. "Is Mom hurt? Did something happen in Miami?" "Your mother isn't hurt," I said, my voice tight. "But she has done something that's going to hurt all of us." I pulled out my tablet, queuing up the damning photos and videos Marissa had collected. "What I'm about to show you is going to be difficult to see," I warned. "But you deserve to know the truth." Lucas leaned forward, his jaw clenching. "Dad, you're scaring me. What's this about?" Instead of answering, I hit play on the first video. The image of Elise and Victor embracing on the beach filled the screen. Megan gasped. "Is that Mom?" Lucas jumped to his feet. "What the hell is this?" "Language," I admonished reflexively, then sighed. "But yes, that's your mother, with a man named Victor Blake." I cycled through more photos and videos, each one driving home the reality of Elise's betrayal. Megan's eyes filled with tears, while Lucas's face hardened into a mask of anger. "How long?" Lucas demanded. "How long has she been cheating on you?" "At least 6 months," I admitted. "Maybe longer." Megan shook her head violently. "No, there has to be some mistake. Mom wouldn't do this to us." "I wish that were true, sweetheart," I said gently. "But the evidence is clear." Lucas paced the room, his fists clenched. "I want to confront her. Right now." "We will," I assured him. "But I need you both to stay calm when she arrives. Can you do that?" They nodded, though I could see the pain and betrayal etched on their faces. We didn't have long to wait. Within the hour, we heard Elise's key in the lock. "I'm home," she called out cheerfully. "Where is everyone?" "In here," I responded, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. Elise appeared in the doorway, her smile faltering as she took in our serious expressions. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes darting between us. "Why the family meeting?" I stood, facing her directly. "How was your trip, Elise? Productive?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Yes, very. The Henderson account is finally on track." "Really?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because it looks like you were pretty busy with other activities." I nodded to Lucas, who hit play on the tablet. Elise's face drained of color as she watched herself kissing Victor on the beach. "Jack, I can explain," she began, but I cut her off. "Save it," I snapped. "We've all seen more than enough." Megan's voice trembled as she spoke. "How could you, Mom? How could you do this to us?" Elise's eyes filled with tears. "Sweetheart, it's not what it looks like." Lucas laughed bitterly. "Are you kidding me? We literally just watched you making out with some guy who isn't Dad. What else could it possibly be?" "I never meant for this to happen," Elise pleaded. "It was a mistake. A 6-month-long mistake?" I interjected. "Try again, Elise." She sank onto the couch, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say." "How about the truth?" I suggested coldly. "For once in your life, try being honest with us." Elise looked up, her makeup streaked with tears. "The truth? The truth is I got caught up in something I couldn't control. Victor. He made me feel alive again." "And we didn't?" Lucas demanded. "Your own family wasn't enough?" "It's not that simple," Elise protested. Megan stood abruptly. "It is that simple, Mom. You chose him over us. Over and over again." I placed a hand on Megan's shoulder, steadying her. "Your mother made her choice. Now we have to make ours." Elise's eyes widened in panic. "What do you mean?" "I'm filing for divorce," I stated flatly, "and I'm seeking full custody of the kids." "No," Elise gasped. "Jack, please. We can work this out." I shook my head. "There's nothing to work out. You destroyed this family the moment you decided to cheat." Lucas turned to his mother, his voice cold. "I don't want to see you anymore. As far as I'm concerned, you're not my mom." "Lucas, please," Elise begged. "Megan?" But Megan just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I gestured towards the door. "I think it's best if you leave now, Elise. We'll have our lawyers handle the rest." As Elise stumbled out of the house, still pleading for another chance, I pulled Lucas and Megan close. "I know this is hard," I murmured, "but we'll get through this together." They nodded, clinging to me as if I were a lifeline in a storm. And in that moment, I vowed to do whatever it took to protect them from the fallout of their mother's betrayal. The next morning, I found myself in Tom's law office, my head pounding from a sleepless night. "How are you holding up?" Tom asked as I slumped into a chair. "About as well as you'd expect," I replied grimly. "The kids are devastated." Tom nodded sympathetically. "I can only imagine. But you did the right thing, Jack. They deserve to know the truth." I rubbed my temples. "I just want this nightmare to be over. What are our options?" Tom pulled out a thick file. "Well, the good news is that South Carolina is a fault divorce state. Elise's infidelity gives us a strong case. And the bad news? Divorce is never easy, especially with kids involved," Tom said. "But we have a secret weapon. Your prenup?" I leaned forward. I'd almost forgotten about that. "What does it say?" Tom flipped through the document. "It's pretty standard stuff, protecting your assets in case of divorce. But there's one clause that's particularly interesting." "Go on," I urged. "If infidelity is proven," Tom read, "the faithful spouse has the right to claim sole custody of any children from the marriage." I let out a low whistle. "That's intense. I don't even remember putting that in there." Tom shrugged. "It's not uncommon in high-net-worth prenups. The question is, do you want to use it?" I considered for a moment. What would that mean for Elise? "She'd lose custody rights," Tom explained. "Visitation would be at your discretion." The thought of denying my children access to their mother, despite everything, made me uncomfortable. Is that really what's best for the kids? Tom leaned back in his chair. That's something only you can decide, Jack. But remember, we're dealing with a woman who lied to her entire family for months. Can you trust her to put the kids' needs first? I sighed heavily. You're right. I need to protect them. Let's move forward with the divorce and custody claim. All right, Tom nodded. I'll file the paperwork today. We'll be dealing with family court, which can be unpredictable. But with the evidence we have and the prenup, we're in a strong position. What about our assets? I asked. The house, the business. Tom consulted the prenup again. The prenup is clear. Your business remains solely yours. As for the house and other joint assets, we can argue that Elise's infidelity voids her claim to an equal split. I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. Good. I want to make sure the kids are taken care of, no matter what. Jack, Tom said cautiously, I know you're hurting, but try not to let anger drive your decisions. The courts don't look kindly on vindictive behavior. I met his gaze steadily. This isn't about vengeance, Tom. It's about justice. Elise made her choice. Now she has to live with the consequences. Tom held up his hands in surrender. Understood. I'll get everything in motion. But Jack, brace yourself. Elise isn't going to go down without a fight. As I left Tom's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Elise. Please, can we talk? For the kids' sake? I ignored it, my resolve hardening. Elise had her chance to think about our kids. Now it was my turn to protect them, no matter the cost. In the days that followed, I threw myself into gathering information. If Elise thought she could walk away from our marriage with her reputation intact, she had another thing coming. I arranged to meet Tom at a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes. What have you found? I asked as soon as he sat down. Tom glanced around before sliding a folder across the table. You're not going to like this, Jack. I flipped through the pages, my anger growing with each revelation. Multiple affairs? Embezzlement? How deep does this go? Deep enough to sink Blake's entire empire, Tom replied grimly. The question is, what do you want to do with this information? I closed the folder, my mind racing. We leak it. All of it. To his business associates, to the media, to anyone who'll listen. Tom raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's wise? Once this gets out, there's no going back. Good, I said firmly. Blake needs to learn that actions have consequences. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, Elise's supposed friend. Jack, can we meet? There's something you need to know. I showed Tom the message. What do you think? He frowned. Be careful. She might be trying to run interference for Elise. I nodded, quickly typing a response to meet Rachel at a nearby park. An hour later, I found Rachel pacing nervously by a fountain. Jack, she said as I approached. Thank you for meeting me. What's this about, Rachel? I asked coldly. She wrung her hands. I knew about the affair. I've been covering for Elise. My fists clenched at my sides. You what? I'm so sorry, Rachel rushed on. I thought I was being a good friend, but I realize now how wrong I was. I struggled to keep my voice level. How long have you known? Almost from the beginning, she admitted. Elise swore it was just a fling, that she'd end it. But she didn't, I finished. And you kept lying for her. Rachel nodded miserably. I want to make it right. Tell me what I can do. A plan began to form in my mind. Actually, Rachel, there is something you can do. I outlined my idea, watching her eyes widen. Jack, that's brutal, she whispered. No more brutal than what they did to my family, I countered. Are you in or out? Rachel hesitated for a long moment before nodding. I'm in. I owe you that much. As Rachel hurried away, I dialed Tom's number. It's done, I said when he answered. Rachel's on board. Time to set our plan in motion. Jack, Tom said warningly, this is a dangerous game you're playing. I gazed out over the park, watching families enjoy the sunny day. Families like mine used to be, before Elise's betrayal tore us apart. It stopped being a game the moment they decided to play with people's lives, I replied. Now it's war. The day of the divorce proceedings arrived, and I found myself standing outside the family court, my stomach in knots. Tom placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You ready for this, Jack?" he asked. I nodded, straightening my tie. "As ready as I'll ever be." We entered the courtroom, and I saw Elise sitting with her lawyer. She looked pale and drawn, a far cry from the confident woman I'd married. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. The judge entered, and we all rose. "Be seated," he instructed. "We're here today for the divorce proceedings of Jack and Elise Reynolds. Mr. Lawson, you may begin." Tom stood, his voice steady. "Your Honor, we're seeking a fault divorce on the grounds of adultery. We have irrefutable evidence of Mrs. Reynolds' infidelity." Elise's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, my client admits to a momentary lapse in judgment, but contests the validity of the prenuptial agreement. We believe it to be overly punitive." The judge raised an eyebrow. "I'll be the judge of that, Counselor. Mr. Lawson, please present your evidence." Tom nodded to me, and I stepped forward with the tablet containing Marissa's photos and videos. As they played on the courtroom screen, I heard Elise's sharp intake of breath. "As you can see, Your Honor," Tom continued, "Mrs. Reynolds engaged in a long-term affair with Victor Blake, a real estate developer in Miami." The judge frowned. "Mrs. Reynolds, do you deny these allegations?" Elise's voice was barely above a whisper. "No, Your Honor." Her lawyer quickly interjected. "While my client acknowledges her indiscretion, we believe the prenuptial agreement's terms regarding custody are extreme and not in the best interest of the children." I clenched my fists, ready to argue, but Tom beat me to it. "Your Honor, if I may," he said, "we have a witness who can speak to the nature of Mrs. Reynolds' affair and its potential impact on the children." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Marissa took the stand, her face impassive as she was sworn in. "Ms. King," Tom began, "can you tell the court about your investigation into Mrs. Reynolds' affair?" Marissa's voice was clear and professional. "I observed Mrs. Reynolds and Mr. Blake over several weeks. Their relationship appeared intimate and established. They met regularly, often during times Mrs. Reynolds had told her family she was working." Elise's lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay." "Overruled," the judge said. "The witness is recounting her direct observations. Continue, Ms. King." Marissa nodded. "During my investigation, I also uncovered information about Mr. Blake's character. He has a history of pursuing married women and using his wealth to manipulate situations to his advantage." I watched Elise's face crumple at Marissa's words. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but I squashed that impulse. She'd made her choice. The judge turned to Elise. "Mrs. Reynolds, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Elise stood, her voice shaking. "I made a terrible mistake, Your Honor. I never meant to hurt my family. I'm begging the court to consider what's best for my children. They need their mother." I couldn't stay silent any longer. "Your Honor, if I may speak?" The judge nodded, and I stood. Elise betrayed not just me, but our entire family. She lied to our children for months, prioritizing her affair over their well-being. How can we trust her to put them first now? Elise's eyes filled with tears. "Jack, please." But I pressed on. The prenuptial agreement was designed to protect our family in exactly this kind of situation. I'm not trying to punish Elise. I'm trying to provide stability for our children in the wake of her choices. The judge considered for a moment. "I've reviewed the prenuptial agreement, and while its terms are indeed strict, Mrs. Reynolds signed it willingly. Given the evidence presented, I see no reason not to enforce it. The divorce is granted, with all terms of the prenuptial agreement to be upheld, including the custody arrangement." Elise let out a choked sob, but I felt only a grim satisfaction. It was done. As we left the courtroom, Tom clapped me on the back. "You did it, Jack. It's over." But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. There was still the matter of Victor Blake to deal with, and I had plans for him. The next phase of my plan unfolded faster than I'd anticipated. With Rachel's help, I compiled a dossier of Victor's shady dealings and past affairs. It was time to let the world see the real Victor Blake. I met Tom at a busy coffee shop, sliding a USB drive across the table. "It's all here," I said quietly. "Every dirty secret, every backroom deal." Tom eyed the drive warily. Jack, are you sure about this? Once it's out there, you can't take it back. I nodded firmly. I'm sure. Blake needs to face the consequences of his actions. And Elise? Tom asked. This will affect her too. I hesitated for a moment, then steeled myself. She made her choice. Now she has to live with it. Tom sighed but pocketed the drive. All right. I'll make sure it gets to the right people anonymously. Over the next few days, I watched as the scandal unfolded. It started with a few whispered rumors, then exploded into full-blown media coverage. Photos of Elise and Victor dominated the local news, while reports of his business irregularities made national headlines. My phone rang constantly. I ignored calls from Elise and Victor, but answered when Rachel's name flashed on the screen. Jack, she said, her voice tight. It's everywhere. Elise just got fired. I closed my eyes, pushing down a flicker of guilt. How bad is it? Rachel's voice cracked. Bad. She's a wreck. And Victor. Jack, his whole empire is crumbling. His partners are jumping ship left and right. Good, I said, perhaps more harshly than I intended. They both need to understand that actions have consequences. There was a pause before Rachel spoke again. Jack, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but is there anything else you need me to do? I considered for a moment. Rachel had been instrumental in exposing the affair, but she'd also enabled it for months. Just tell the truth, Rachel, I finally said. If the media comes calling, tell them everything you know. No more lies, no more cover-ups. Okay, she whispered. I will. And Jack? I'm so sorry for my part in all this. I ended the call without responding. Her apology meant nothing to me now. As the day wore on, the story grew. Victor's business associates began speaking out, revealing years of unethical practices. Elise's name was dragged through the mud, her reputation in tatters. That evening, as I sat with Lucas and Megan, watching the news coverage, Lucas turned to me. Did you do this, Dad? He asked, his voice a mix of awe and concern. I met his gaze steadily. I made sure the truth came out. That's all. Megan hugged her knees to her chest. What's going to happen to Mom now? I pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll get through this together, okay? As my children clung to me, seeking comfort in the storm I'd unleashed, I wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I remembered the look on Elise's face in those photos with Victor, and my resolve hardened once more. The truth was out. Now they all had to face it. A week after the scandal broke, I sat in my office, reviewing contracts when my assistant buzzed in. Mr. Reynolds? Elise is here to see you. She's quite insistent. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Send her in. Elise burst through the door, her eyes wild and red-rimmed. How could you do this to me, Jack? I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice level. I didn't do anything to you, Elise. Your choices led us here. She slammed her hands on my desk. My choices? You destroyed my life. I've lost everything because of you. No, I said firmly. You lost everything because you decided to cheat on your family. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. Elise collapsed into a chair, her anger giving way to despair. What am I supposed to do now? No one will hire me. I can't even see my own children. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You should have thought about that before you started your affair. It wasn't just an affair, Elise whispered. I loved him. I laughed bitterly. And how's that working out for you now? Elise's eyes flashed. Victor will fix this. He has connections. Money? Had, I corrected. Past tense. Your boyfriend's empire is in ruins, Elise. He can't help you now. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Speak of the devil, I muttered. Seeing Victor's name on the screen, I put the call on speaker. Reynolds. Victor's voice was ragged. What have you done? I smirked at Elise. I simply shone a light on the truth, Blake. How does it feel to have your secrets exposed? You've ruined me, Victor snarled. My business, my reputation, it's all gone. Welcome to the club, Elise muttered. Victor's tone changed, becoming almost pleading. Look, Reynolds, surely we can work something out. I have resources, connections. We could make a deal. I cut him off. There's no deal to be made, Blake. You played with fire, and now you're getting burned. Both of you are. Elise stood, her voice shaking. Jack, please. If you ever loved me, if you care about our children at all, you'll stop this. I met her gaze coldly. I do love our children. That's why I'm making sure they understand that actions have consequences. This ends when I say it ends. Victor's voice crackled through the speaker. You can't do this to us. I already have, I replied, then ended the call. Elise stared at me, a mixture of fear and awe in her eyes. I never knew you could be so ruthless. I stood, coming around the desk to face her. You never really knew me at all, did you, Elise? If you had, you'd have known better than to betray me. She reached out, her hand trembling. Jack, I stepped back. It's over, Elise. You made your choice. Now live with it. As Elise left my office, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It was done. They'd faced the consequences of their actions, and I'd had my revenge. But as I sank back into my chair, I realized the hollow victory brought me little comfort. The real work was just beginning, healing my family and moving forward. Months passed, and slowly, life began to find a new rhythm. Lucas and Megan, still reeling from their mother's betrayal, threw themselves into their studies and activities. I made sure to be there for every game, every performance, every moment they needed me. One sunny Saturday, as I watched Megan practice her soccer drills, Tom joined me on the sidelines. How are you holding up? He asked, handing me a coffee. I shrugged. One day at a time. The kids are resilient, but it's been tough. Tom nodded. And Elise? Victor? Last I heard, Elise moved back in with her parents in Ohio. Victor's facing some legal troubles. Fraud, embezzlement, that sort of thing. I sipped my coffee. Can't say I'm shedding any tears for either of them. You did what you had to do, Jack, Tom said quietly. They brought this on themselves. I watched as Megan scored a goal, her face lighting up with pride. I just hope I did the right thing for the kids. Speaking of doing the right thing, Tom said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I couldn't help but notice you've been spending a lot of time with a certain private investigator lately. I felt my face warm. Marissa's been a good friend. She understands what we're going through. Tom raised an eyebrow. Just a friend? Before I could respond, I heard Marissa's voice behind us. Who's just a friend? I turned, unable to hide my smile as she approached. Hey, you made it. Marissa grinned, her eyes twinkling. Wouldn't miss it. How's our soccer star doing? See for yourself, I said, nodding towards the field where Megan was expertly dribbling past her teammates. As we watched the practice together, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past few months had been a nightmare, but standing here with Marissa, cheering on my daughter, I could finally see a future beyond the pain and betrayal. Later that evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Lucas looked up from his plate. Hey, Dad, I was thinking, maybe we could take that trip we always talked about. You know, the one to the Grand Canyon? Megan's eyes lit up. Oh yeah, can we, Dad? Please. I glanced at Marissa, who gave me an encouraging nod. You know what? That sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. As my children cheered and began excitedly planning our adventure, I caught Marissa's eye. She smiled warmly, and I felt my heart skip a beat. Room for one more on this trip? She asked softly. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. Always. As we sat there, laughing and planning, I realized that despite everything we'd been through, we were going to be okay. More than okay. Even. We were going to thrive. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with my children by my side and Marissa in my life, I was ready to face whatever came our way. The betrayal that had shattered our world had also opened the door to a new beginning. And this time, I was determined to get it right. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.